G'day and welcome to another video. In today's lesson we will learn how to make this easy vest. We will be using Red Heart Super Saver in the colour turquoise, but I will give you instructions on how to use lighter weight yarn. I hope you enjoy this video, so let's get started on the lesson. What we're going to do is we're going to take a measurement. So you'll need a tape measure, and what we're going to do is we're going to take a measurement from the top of the shoulder, and then we're going to measure down to the length that you want your vest. So using centimetres or inches, whatever you use, place your tape measure on the top. You want to go over your chest, so you want to include your bust, and you want to measure down until you have the length that you want. So let's just say, for example, it's 50 centimetres. You want to write down 50 centimetres. Then we are going to make a chain that is 50 centimetres long. You can add extra if you need to. In fact, I would add probably some extra chains. That way, when you come to do your first row, if you don't quite have enough stitches, you can use those extra chains that you've put on. We can always undo extra chains. It's just pretty hard to put them in when we already have done our row. Now, I will admit that when I first did this, I did my measurement, I crocheted my first 2-3 rows, and mine was too long, so I did have to pull mine back out. I actually did that twice, to be honest, just to get the right length. Now if we make our piece and it's too short, we can add a ribbing section around the bottom. I will be adding, mine is actually a little bit too long for me, so I'm only going to add a few rows of the rib. But if you make it too short, you can add a big section of the rib down the bottom. That's why this pattern is great. It's easily to adjust. And also, I would highly recommend using 4 balls. So you're going to have a front and a back, and you're going to use 2 strands at once. So you're going to use 2 balls for the front and then 2 balls for the back. You probably won't need all that yarn. I don't need all that yarn, but it is making it so much easier for me to work with. Now I'm going to show you all the stitches and everything in just a moment, and keep your yarn attached. After you've made your 2 sections, my yarn is still attached to mine. Keep it still attached, because what I did when I tried on, I sort of put it together really roughly and I tried it on, and it was actually too big. I'd crocheted too many rows, so I was actually able to, because I hadn't finished it off, I was able to pull those rows out really easily. And of course, if you made it too short, it's easily to continue on and add more rows to your front and your back piece. Now, I will change angles and we'll go to the crochet part of the video, and I'll show you what to do. And now I've chose the half double crochet stitch for my project. You could use single crochet. Single crochet won't be as flexible, and you could also use double crochet or any other stitch that you choose. It's basically just making 2 rectangles. Another measurement that you will need to have is also the biggest part of your body. So it might be your chest, or it might be your hips, or it might be your bottom. What you need to do is take a measuring tape, and then you're going to measure around the biggest part of your body. So it might be around here, or it might be around your hips. And that will give us a great guide, so when we're making our 2 rectangles, how long to make our piece of work. Because we're actually crocheting, we start with the length like that, and then we're crocheting across that way. So that's how we know how much to do. And of course, don't forget, we can actually put these together, or actually use stitch markers to hold it all in place, and we can actually try it on to see if it fits. So it's not like we're going to get to the end and then freak out because we've made it too big or too small. So we can actually try this one on as we go. So this is one of my rectangles. Well, it's actually upside down because the chain's up here. But see how I've got extra chains on the end there? That's because when I made my chain, I've actually made it too long. So they're easy to take out. But as you can see, my yarn is still attached to my ball. My ball's just over there off the side of the camera. and I've made 2 rectangles exactly the same. So when we do our chain and then we do our stitches, I want you to count your stitches on your first row, and I want you to write that down because we need to make 2 pieces that are identical. For our supplies, we will need a yarn needle with a large eye, a pair of scissors. These are available on my website. I will put a link in the description box below so you can check them out. We're going to need stitch markers. Now, we won't actually be using them to mark a stitch and to mark our place or anything, but we will need these to hold the project together when we're trying it on. I've got a stack of these. I've got like 20 or so of these, so that's what I've used. You could also use pieces of yarn about that big. We just need it to tie up the top around the shoulder section on the sides, just when we're trying it on before we actually stitch it together. So I just used a heap of those. We're going to need some yarn. I'm using 2 strands of medium worsted weight yarn. You could use 1 strand of the bulky, which is in the US, and if you're in the UK or Australia, you could use 2 strands of 8-ply or double knit, or you could use 2 strands of 10-ply, and that will give you the same thickness as this. The crochet hook I'm using is an 8mm. I'm not 100% sure on the size of that, but it is quite big. You want a big crochet hook because you've got 2 strands of yarn, and we're going to be using them as one. You'll also need a 5 or a 5.5mm crochet hook, which is a H or an I size. If you're using different yarn to the worsted weight, just use the crochet hook that your yarn recommends for you to use. So what we want to do is make a slip knot. And we're going to make the chain. And remember how we had to take that measurement of how long we wanted it to be? Well, we're going to do that now. So just make a chain as long as you need that measurement. And like I said before in the video, I would suggest adding about 10 or so extra chains than what you need, because if you need to use them, they're already there, rather than trying to add them in and doing it later. So once you have the chain the length that you need, we're going to use the half double crochet stitch. What we need to do is we need to crochet into the second stitch from the crochet hook. This is not counted, this is number 1 and that's number 2. We're going to yarn over and we're going to go into the stitch, and then we're going to complete a half double crochet. So yarning over, going into the stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through all 3. We're going to continue this all the way across until we get to the end of our chain. What I would like you to do after you finish this row, I want you to check your measurement again. So place this piece of crocheted work on yourself from your shoulder down to where you want your length to see if it's the right length. And I didn't do that the first time I did this, because I've already made my rectangles. I'm just showing this little bit for the demo, and it was too long for the length that I wanted to make it, so I had to rip it out. Like I said, I did that twice because I wasn't happy. So continue on until you get to the end of your chain. When we get to the end, now I'm sorry I'm using such a small piece, but if I try to use the actual huge rectangle that I have, I don't think I'm going to fit it in front of the camera very well. So yours will look like this, it'll just be a lot longer. So when we get to the end, we've done a half double crochet in our last stitch. We're going to chain 1. We're going to turn our work around. Sometimes in patterns it tells you to skip the first stitch because the chain 1, 2 or 3 counts as your first stitch. What we're going to do is ignore this chain 1 and we are actually going to crochet into that first stitch. So yarning over and then working your half double crochet. And what this does, it gives you a really straight edge. sometimes when you crochet you have like a little wheelie bit on the side. Well, this makes it pretty straight. So in every stitch across you can work a half double crochet. You could use back and front loops only if you wanted to have a ribbed look to your work. So continue on until you get to the other side of your piece of work. And also just double check again that your strip that you're making is the right length that you need. You're better off to rip out 1 or 2 rows than to do, 10 or 15 and have to rip that out. When we get to the end, we don't want to forget to work into that last stitch, because if we do, our piece will gradually get smaller and it'll probably look like a triangle. And we don't want that. So continue on repeating that row, chaining up 1 half double crochet in the first stitch and every stitch across. Don't forget, when we come back to the other end, so if we turn our work, we come back and we half double crochet into the end there. We don't want to forget that last stitch. So continue on, and then once you've done this one, like I said, you would have needed to write down how many stitches you did across there, and we're going to make 2 of these. So we've got the front and the back section of our vest. So now I have 2 rectangles, one's laid on top of the other. And when we join them together, what we want to do is make sure that this is what I want to do. You could change it if you like, that's perfectly fine. But I want to have, this is my starting chain on this edge, and then that's my finishing row on that edge. So I want a finishing and a starting row together, and then on this side this is my finishing edge, and then on the bottom one it's my starting chain. Because when you sew it together, I want it to look even. If we sew both starting chains together, I think it's going to look weird when we join it together on the sides. At least that way, if they're both the same on both sides, they'll look the same. So what we want to do now is, we have our rectangle. I've got 2 of these, and you're going to place it on yourself, or your mannequin if you're lucky to have one, and you're going to make sure that it fits across you. So when I've crocheted my work, I've crocheted it that way, but we're going to turn it so it's that way. We want our rows to go up and down, not across ourselves. So what you're going to do is you're going to place it on yourself, and you're going to make sure, if you've got a bigger bust, that it actually comes around the sides. But of course we're going to stitch it together just to hold it in place with our stitch markers or our spare yarn, and we're going to try it on just to make sure we haven't made it too big or too small, because we want to adjust that before we stitch it together. So I'll show you how to do that in just a moment. So you're going to need a heap of stitch markers, or we are going to need some scrap yarn, so you could tie it up as well. That would make the same effect. So I'm just going to crouch down next to it. We're going to get our stitch markers, and basically all they're going to do is just hold the sides together. So I'm just grabbing the stitches on the back one and the front one, and then doing up a stitch marker. Put them every, say, 2 inches. Now how far up the side you go is completely up to you. You don't want to make it too far, because I have a feeling that it may make it hard to actually get it on, to put on your vest. But I sort of want this to be sort of casual and sort of relaxed. I don't want it all fitted like a formal vest. I want this all sort of loose and casual. So now what we're going to do, I'll put some up the side. I'm going to go up the top here. So this is our shoulders, here and here, and that's our neck hole. So what we're going to do is, again, grab your stitch markers and just place them on. Now if this is for yourself, you're going to find this so much easier to try it on and make it fit the size that you need. We don't want to go too far across, otherwise we won't be able to get our head in there. So I've just put it on her. I've still got all the stitch markers and everything in. And at the moment it kind of looks a bit meh. Because what we're going to do, and please excuse that noise in the background, I'm hoping it's not too loud in the video. What we're going to do to fix up the bagginess around here, we're actually going to crochet around there to bring that in and to make that look all pretty. So you can see some of the stitch markers still down there. So you're going to just basically make the opening as high as you want it. But like I said, I don't want it too tight around my arm. I want it to be like easy to get on, get off, and look really casual. So again, the neck, you would have noticed if you couldn't get it on, because you would have made the neck hole too small. So you can adjust that. I haven't actually tried this on myself yet, so I'm going to do that when I take it off Rachel. Rachel's skinnier than me. She doesn't eat much at all. Probably because she doesn't have a head. Yeah, but she's a size Australian 8 ladies, and I'm a size 10 Australian ladies, which I think's a 4 in the US. I'm not sure. Yeah, so what we're going to do, once you are satisfied with your stitch markers are in the right spot, you've adjusted it to fit you around the neck and around the armholes, etc., you're going to stitch the sides up. So I'm going to show you how to do that next. You could crochet it together. May not look as nice as stitching it together, because I know some people don't like to sew things together. I prefer to crochet them together myself, but I think sewing up the sides will give it a real neat seam instead of the crochet. Okay, so hang on and we'll start the sides of our garment. So I'm on the side of my work. This is the side. I've threaded my needle already. When I cut my yarn off that was attached to my balls, I left at least 14 inches. Probably more like 16 inches without actually measuring it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch the sides together. I'm going to go through both loops. And we want to make this as neat as possible. Don't pull too tight, otherwise it may make it all it'll be all wrinkly. We want it to lay flat. Of course, if you want to join it in a different way, go for it. This is just the way that I'm doing it. So we want to repeat this on all of the bits that we need to sew up. So our side bit, both of those, and then both of these sections up on our shoulders. Now it's time to add the armhole. So this is my armhole in here. What we're going to do is we're going to grab our smaller crochet hook. I'm just using a 5 or a H size. Sorry, a 5mm or a size H. We're going to join our yarn in, but we're going to use one strand of yarn. So I've only got one strand. and we're going to half double crochet around the opening of the armhole. And what will happen, it will start to tighten up because we're using one strand, not two, and we're also using a 5mm or a H instead of the 8mm crochet hook. Sorry, this is really hard to get into the screen because I have so much fabric to work with. Okay, so continue around, and I'm actually going to grab a stitch marker and I'm going to place it at the opening there. That'll let me know where I need to join it to. So continue around, putting a half double crochet in each stitch around. When we get to the stitch marker, we're going to slip stitch to join, and I'm going to work one more round of half double crochet in each stitch, and then I'm just going to finish that off at the end. But you can work as many rounds as you like. To start the neck, what we're going to do, we've got our big crochet hook, and we're going to put it into a stitch around the neck hole. Got our 2 strands of yarn. Going to attach that to around our neck. It's quite bulky now, so it's going to take up lots of room. And we're going to work a double crochet. So we're going to work 3 chains into the next stitch. We're going to work a double crochet. I think if we worked a half double crochet around the neck for the ribbing, it will be really stiff because it's a smaller stitch, so it's going to come up a lot different. I can't make it so the background is black. Sorry guys, but I'm sure you know how to do a double crochet. So we're just working our way around. And work a double crochet stitch. What's that? That's better. Double crochet stitch all the way around until we get back to the beginning, so all the way around the neck opening. So I've worked my way around, and when we get back to the beginning, we're going to work a stitch into that same space as the chain 3. Now we could have worked that at the beginning, but we could also do it at the end, so it's all good. And then we're going to join to the chain 3. What we're going to do is we're going to work our first front post stitch around these 2 stitches because we want to hide that chain 3. So chain 3, double crochet front post or front post double crochet around those 2 stitches. So the crochet hook's gone behind them. Going to work a front post stitch, and around every stitch we're going to work front post double crochet. So continue on until we get back to the beginning. When we get around, we want to join to the top of the first double crochet, ignoring the chain 3. Chain up 3, and then work a front post double crochet around the chain 3 and sorry, not the chain 3, around that front post double crochet. No, that doesn't look right. Around both. Sorry guys. Just wanted to show you both of those. I won't edit that out, I'll leave that part in just to show you what that looked like, the difference. That looks better. And then we're going to work a front post double crochet in every stitch around. And we're going to repeat this until you have your neck the length that you desire. Once we have our neck done, this is what it's going to look like. Zoom in a little bit so you can see that neck. And just zoom out so you can see the whole thing, what I've got so far. Ooh, and see all my craft room basically. All my books and things and my yarn collection. Yes, it is very empty, isn't it, ladies and gentlemen? I need to go shopping. So I'm just going to adjust the camera down a bit just so you can see the whole thing. There we go. So that's what mine looks like so far. I have the sides done and I've got my neck done. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to work a round of crochet just around the bottom just to neaten it off, exactly like what we did with the arms. Of course, if you want to make a rib section, you could use the same method as what we've just used on the neck. I just want to neaten it off, so I'm only going to use 1 or 2 rounds of just plain crochet. I'll probably use the same stitch that I did around the arms just to make it look uniform. So as you can see, my yarn is still connected, so I will need to finish that off. But keep going until you have as many rounds as you would like on the neck. Don't forget, once you have finished, to sew in all your ends. I hope you enjoyed this project. Please share your finished creation on our Facebook page. I will put all the links in the description box. Please subscribe as there will be plenty more videos to come. Thanks for watching, and until next time, happy crochet!